So welcome to this little series I'm doing. This is mostly going to be reserved for moments and situations where the Eastern Pacific, for some reason or another, is quiet. And this is one of these times. So I'm recording this ahead of time because right now I'm bored and I kind of want to fill my videos with something. When and if there's some downtime in the Eastern Pacific hurricane season and I want something to fill out my day with, because I want to actually have a video out every day now, I decided to make this into from a weekly thing to a daily thing. But right now, since there's nothing active on this particular day, since there is nothing active on this particular day, whenever this is being posted, I'm kind of gonna do this new series about what it was like in the past in the EPAC, in the Eastern Pacific. Instead of going from the oldest to newest, let's go from the newest to oldest, because that's kind of how we perceive things as people. So let's talk about, like, around 2014 there was some debate whether we've entered the inactive era or not. And in general, since around 2010, EPAC activity began to rebound after being silent for so long. But prior to 2010, what was the Eastern Pacific like? What was the Eastern Pacific like, and even into the early 2010s? Well, first of all, the Eastern Pacific was almost like a dark, quiet place. There was very, very little interest in it. No one really knew anything about the basin or its history, and there was no interest for people to learn stuff about it. You were pretty much, by today's standards, even though I was growing up, being little, and I was very involved in tracking these seasons. I mean, by today's standards, these seasons were terrible. I mean, you were lucky at this point to get a season with an ACE of 80 and have a season of at least. Also, you were lucky if you got more than 2 majors in a season and had an ACE higher than 75. You really had to appreciate whatever you could get. Yes, there were moments, and yes, there'd be some surprises, and yes, there'd be a few good storms like they are in all basins. Overall, you really had to take them as it goes. I mean, once it's anticipated, you really had no idea when the next one would form. Even if the MTO base state was favorable, there's a chance that, there's always a chance, for instance, the Atlantic could come in and steal a few tropical waves, and the season would be done for like a month. We never knew what was going to happen. Even in the relatively active months of June and July and October, for all you knew, there's a possibility of having 0, or in a couple cases, or one storm in months like those. Wind shear was dominant. Which is so many much more wild cards at play. Yes, you had the systems like we've seen the past several years now. Since after around 2009, when you started to see the East Coast trough started dominating the weather pattern, and that combined with the return of the active era, with the plus PO phase returning late 2013/early 2014, with that epic NPO block. Those two factors have allowed for the EPAC to revive the past few years. And even before then, then the EPAC activity began to increase. But I mean, there were some pretty bad seasons to have. I mean, I'll get there and stuff. Talk about 2000's later, but let's talk about what happened. I was going to say, but even in the early 2010s, activity began to increase a little bit in the end. From 2010 present, each season is finished with a higher named storm count, higher than the previous one. I think there's a decent chance of that sticking in 2015 right now still. However, let's kind of summarize the season. So 2000 opened the millennium. I mean, 2000 overall was a pretty weak season. I mean, there were only, I think, 2 majors, even one. Was it 1 major or was it 2? I mean, Hurricane Carlotta was a pretty impressive hurricane, I thought. It was around late June, and arguably should have been classified as a Category 5 hurricane. It had peak wind of 135 knots. So that hurricane also passed dangerously close to the Mexican coast and managed to kill 18 people in a shipwreck. In addition, it also came close enough to prompt hurricane warnings along the Mexican coast. In addition, aside from Carlotta, 2000 wasn't much of a hurricane season, though it did have a high named storm count. It did have a few interesting things like Tropical Storm Rosa. And Tropical Storm Rosa, which hit the Central American coast in late November, I think. Besides that, 2000 wasn't much of a season. It was sort of like 2013, for those of you that followed 2013. I mean, I didn't actually personally have a chance to track 2000, so I don't have much memories from it. Then you had, following 2000, you had 2001, which was arguably worse. Like 2000, it had one nice early season hurricane, that was, Hurricane Ada, which was a rare late May, mid-grade Category 4 hurricane. Obviously, since then, that record for strongest May hurricane was surpassed by Andre's last year. In 2001, like 2000, had pretty similar storm count. It was pretty similar in storm count. He actually even less, and didn't have much. Actually, had a couple less storms actually, and overall did not have much quality. 2001 did have a nice late season hurricane, Hurricane Juliet, though. Even that disappointing to some extent, even though overall I think Juliet is one of the more interesting landfall EPAC hurricanes. Some extent it was disappointing. Like ODU, Juliet was known for its low pressure, and when the aircraft hurricane hunters intercepted it, they found an unusually low pressure of 921 millibars, despite also finding lower than expected winds. So as a result, Juliet's intensity remains a mystery. 2002 is an interesting season. At minimum, might have been the best in a decade, solely based on the fact that it had 3 Category 5 hurricanes, but like 2002, like 2001, aside from those 3 Cat 5s and Hurricane Fausto, which actually in hindsight, when I first started getting into the EPAC, when I first read up about Fausto, I thought it was something truly special, but in reality, when push comes to shove, I later found out that it was not that special. It probably was no different from Hurricanes Ana and Julio last year. I mean, Hurricane Canada did hit Mexico with a Category 5 at peak intensity, and hit Mexico as an unraveling Category 4 hurricane. So that's something, I guess. 2003 was actually another pretty interesting season, but nothing special. Like, even the inactive seasons, when worse comes to worse, I guess, one of the spinning in the positive note, that's something I absolutely did at that time, and I was looking back at seasons that, since I did not anticipate the return of the active year so quickly. I studied these recent 2000 seasons when I started getting into hurricanes because I was thinking that the next decade or so, hurricane seasons that I would be tracking would be very similar to the 2000s. And it turns out the 2000s was actually a decent plus PDO stretch for a while. And as such, no La Nina formed, even though one was expected to form. And as such, it did manage to get 16 storms, but no majors. Interestingly, it took a record way to start a record 9 storms or total around August 24th to get our first hurricane of the season. And then we finally got it. And then since then, every storm except for one was a hurricane. However, quite interestingly, even though there were several Category 2 hurricanes, even though it still ended up with having 2003 still ended up with no major hurricanes. So 2004, and I vaguely, that's the first season I actually vaguely remember. I don't remember much about it. I remember, yeah, it was really overshadowed by the Atlantic, so it got no attention. Even though Javier was a pretty impressive storm, and I thought Hurricane Starby and Howard were decent as well. Even though that was an El Nino, that was a classic Medoki El Nino, which resulted in extreme shield of the Eastern Pacific, and more or less, from a statistical point of view, since all the upward motion was favored across the Central Pacific, even though the storm tracks were shifted west, I mean, overall, 2004 more or less is essentially a La Nina season. Though it did have 3 major hurricanes, which was the second highest total since 1998, and shows how impressive the EPAC had been the past 8 years. 2007 was a little better, even though I will say it had one highlight. It did tie a record for most storms in a month, with 6, I think, during September. Obviously, like 2004, all the activity was overshadowed by the Atlantic, even though it did have a couple noteworthy events, and it also had a 2-storm June, marking the first time that there had been a storm in June since 2003. Since 2004, did not have any June storms whatsoever. 2006, however, got into a very slow start, and once again appeared like it would be another one of those inaccurate years. However, an El Nino formed, much like an El Nino formed in 2002. The PDO is warmer than it was in 2002. As a result, we actually got a pretty solid season with 19 storms and several powerful hurricanes for a change. I mean, it had Hurricane Eo becoming a Category 5 over the Central Pacific, and that is not something you do not see every day, and as such, this is not something that should be treated lightly. In addition, Hurricanes John and Lane brought a lot of damage to the Mexican coast, and it's kind of a hurricane season that I really envied, and I really enjoyed, and it really, 2006, helped me like the Eastern Pacific a lot more. So, even until I say around 2008 to 2010-ish, overall, until that time, I was pretty fond on the Atlantic as a basin. I thought the basin was pretty interesting but I will say 2006 did really help me get sucked into the EPAC, and it worked out. And after looking at statistics a couple years later, when I started looking at around 2008, when I really started to look at statistics and looking and comparing past hurricane seasons, I mean, I thought 2006 was kind of like the banner EPAC season of the generation. I mean, 2007 was another dead season with 11 storms, and the only sea storm even remotely worth a shit was Flossie. 2008 had an excellent start. It appeared that season was poised to become the most active, poised to have become for the first time in several decades in several years. It appeared that that season was poised to become the first above average season. However, the season totally collapsed in August when the EPAC took over, and as a result, activity fell off. No, the EPAC took over. The Atlantic took over, and as a result, activity fell off the roof, and September ended up having the lowest ace on record. And even though the season rebounded in October with Hurricanes Norbert and Tropical Storm Odile striking Mexico around at the same time, it was too little, too late at that point. And anything else. And then that brings us to the last season of the decade, 2009. 2009, in some sorts, was part of a renaissance. I mean, it went, however, like all seasons that decade, seemingly, except for 2008, got on to a terrible start. I mean, it's arguably part of the, arguably to be an above average season. I don't think on my website. I don't have it listed as such on my site, but it arguably is an above average hurricane season. I mean, it turned out with 20 storms, I think, several majors, and it had Hurricanes Jimena, which hit Baja, and Hurricane Rick, probably my favorite storm I've ever tried out. If I thought 2006 was good, I thought 2009 was better. So I actually felt, quite interestingly, even with some slightly above average seasons like 2006, 2009, I kind of learned over time to appreciate the fact that I was able to track 2 seasons like this in a span of 4 years, and I felt kind of fortunate. Overall, I felt satisfied that despite all this inactivity, the past few seasons I felt in 2009 had at least decided to be respectable. Anyhow, that'll wrap up this video. Holy shit, 17 minutes. Anyhow, that'll wrap this up. This 2000s recap video. Maybe I'll do the 2010s later. But for now, bye.